Good morning. I am Chris Steyerwalt, and these are your buzz cuts from Fox News First. Off the top, Lerner helped craft new IRS political crackdown. What about that? Lois Lerner, she pleaded the fifth because she did not want to incriminate herself, she said, in front of House testimony. Well, it turns out in emails obtained by Republicans in Congress on the House Ways and Means Committee that she was part of drafting controversial new rules that would encourage or expand the IRS's authority to what critics say would be suppress dissent from nonprofit groups. What about that? That's interesting. On a day that lots is happening with the IRS, we will check into all of it. Number two, employers ready ObamaCare insurance cuts. Dun, dun, dun. Washington Examiner tells us that a Duke University survey of top companies found that 44% are considering reducing health benefits to current employees due to ObamaCare. And that comes on the heels of the new CBO report, of course, that talked about what it will do to people working, which is less. Obama, I can help Dems in some parts of some states. Now, you want to talk about slim solace. The president talking to a group of Senate Democrats as they gathered for, I guess, what we'd call a meeting on the mound, on the pitcher's mound at Washington National Stadium. He said, no, I can't help you all, or even really any, but what I can do is that some of you in some parts of some states, I can help you. That is defining it down, I should say. So, number four, Clinton's super PAC won't help hold the Senate. So the Democratic Party's biggest super PAC spokesperson told BuzzFeed that there will not be any play in the midterms for the Priorities USA action. Used to be an Obama super PAC, now it's a Hillary super PAC. They're not going to fool around with it. And last but definitely not least, Big Mouth saves the day. He may have ended up gasping on the floor of the crime scene, but he apparently saved the day for the proprietors of Hooked on Fishing in Rochester, Minnesota. Authorities say Big Mouth Billy Bass, the popular motion-activated animatronic novelty display as seen on TV, scared away a would-be burglar. The bass, mounted by the shop store, apparently broke into strains of Take Me to the River. When the intruder broke in, the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office said the intruder left in a hurry. Sergeant Tom Clayman told the Minneapolis Star-Tribune that the fake fish took one for the team, noting that nothing was missing other than Billy's pride. Those are your buzz cuts. You'd have them already if you were a subscriber to Fox News First. Why not? It's free. It's the internet. You'd dig it. Just give us your email address and we'll give it to you each morning. But we're going to do it all right now because this is Power Play.
So you're saying
if you were involved,
no corruption there at all? No.
That's not what I'm saying. That's actually...
No, but I want to know what you're saying. You're the leader of the
Absolutely.
country. You're saying no corruption?
No.
None?
No. There were some boneheaded decisions out of a
but no
office.
Mass corruption?
Not even mass corruption. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Not even a smidgen of corruption. That's what President Obama said about the targeting of conservative groups by agents at the IRS. And this is Power Play. So why did he say that? I probably shouldn't have said that. In retrospect, no doubt, the administration wishes the president hadn't said that because, of course, there is an IRS investigation. There is an investigation of the IRS being handled at the Justice Department, the very existence of which is the reason that people don't have to testify in front of Congress and do stuff like that. The investigation exists. It shields members of the administration from having to testify to crabby Republicans on Capitol Hill about what happened at the IRS. But then you can't say that you already know what happened, right? I think so. I think that's right. Someone who will correct me if I am wrong, I am sure. I want you to meet. This is Elise Vivek. She is a staff writer for The Hill. She works for Bob Cusack, so don't hold that against her. And you are our welcome guest. Hi, Elise.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So the president was being cute when he was having some fun with Bill O'Reilly. Not even a smidgen of corruption. And he said that. And then Republicans said, hey, wait a minute, I thought you said that we still had a criminal investigation that was ongoing at the Justice Department. So he probably ought not to have said that, right?
He probably should not have said that, and I'm sure his handlers are telling him that in retrospect. That investigation is one of, I believe, 6 that are still ongoing that we don't know the results of.
Really?
It's really a long list of investigations that are still ongoing.
What else we got cooking?
Oh, boy. Several out of the Hill, one from the Justice Department.
Oh, just about the IRS.
Just
Who's
about
all
the
or
IRS.
who are
That's
investigating
right.
the IRS.
That's right.
But there's only one that gives you the right to immunity or to not incriminate yourself, right? It has to be a criminal investigation. You can't incriminate yourself in a civil investigation. So there has to be a criminal investigation going to have the Fifth Amendment protections, right?
That's true, but the point is that there's still a lot of information yet to come out. And so regardless of the possible damage to Obama, it just wasn't wise given all the information that's left that we don't know. And so I think that there are going to be a lot of new revelations, and he's going to be again on the spot to answer similar questions, but hopefully we'll have a wider understanding at that point.
Part of what's happening today is we've got a hearing on the Hill about this. We have allegations from these Tea Party groups that the targeting is ongoing. We have the allegation I shared earlier that Lerner, who was a powerful official at the IRS, was the Congress has got a hold of emails that sound very, they don't sound good, in which they're having off-record, quiet, secret conversations about promulgating these new rules, which the conservative groups, I shouldn't just say conservative groups, liberals too, the American Civil Liberties Union and others say that these rules would stifle dissent.
That's correct, and I think that this is the next big battlefield for Republicans as these rules aim to be finalized. Certainly many Democrats on the Democrats on Capitol Hill have actually sued to get these rules done as quickly as possible because they want to see these 501c4s cracked down on. But right now, Republicans, including leadership in both the House and Senate, have said, no, these rules should not be finalized because ultimately they do represent an extension of what Republicans believe is targeting by the administration.
And the reason the Lerner emails are significant is that if somebody who has pleaded the Fifth Amendment and who is seen at the center of the scandal, if she is part of promulgating the rules, it would go strongly to the claim by Mitch McConnell and others that these rules are simply the codification of what was done off the cuff at the IRS.
That's correct. Now, of course, the IRS and the Treasury Department more broadly have come out and said that these rules were under debate and under discussion for many years. Of course, for several election cycles, we've had discussion about 501c4s and whether the administration ought to step in and curb their political activity. And so that's their defense right now. But Jim Jordan came out and said that he believes that Lois Lerner will appear before lawmakers again to answer to some of these claims. Now, again, she could do what she did last time, so we might not get more information out of her, but we'll see. Jim
Jordan is upset. I would describe that Jim Jordan is upset, and he is particularly upset because the woman who is in charge of, or not, her role is been debated back and forth between the Republicans and Democrats. But the woman who is part of, in a leadership role, in the investigation from the Justice Department is an Obama donor.
That's right. And so that's what Republicans are upset about right now.
But I have to ask you, why would the administration, why would the president not him personally, why would his team not take this all more seriously? You got to be a little more freaked out about this stuff and at least act concerned, because if you don't, you know what you end up with? Special prosecutor. That's what you end up with.
Right, which is a much worse situation. Let's be clear.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Right. And so this woman, she was a Democratic donor. And she is
maxed out.
That's right. And so I think there's a question about whether she can do her job without bias, and that's what Republicans are asking.
Well, here's the thing. We've talked before, and people from across the political gamut have pointed to the rigorous secrecy of this administration. These are not chatty Cathys. They have prosecuted. They have James Rosened people. They have done other things to avoid talking and sharing, and they have been hard on leaks, and they have been transparent, but not necessarily accountable in the sense of providing relevant data.
And I would even question whether they've been transparent, but yeah.
Well, I did air quotes.
Air quotes
at least.
around transparent. There you go.
I did air quotes. I'm not, this ain't my first rodeo. But I would say that for this administration in particular, as Bill Clinton would recall, once a special prosecutor gets in the door,
that's right.
For Bill Clinton, it was a special prosecutor about a land deal in Arkansas, which everybody agreed was totally shady McGrady. And that was the Whitewater investigation that ended up being about that other thing with that one woman that happened. And so once you let a special prosecutor in the door, they're going to pull and pull and pull. And there's so much checked and unknown about this administration, that could be a real bad scenario for them.
That's right. What's so interesting to me is that this is an administration that is so totally consumed by the optics of situations, and that comes into all of their dealings with the press. You think they would have thought of that when they selected this woman?
Just look concerned,
Just look concerned, and maybe don't appoint a major Obama donor to lead this investigation.
Noises. We're looking into this. We're pounding the table, blah, blah. I guess they just didn't think it was for reals. All right, that was your segment with Elise. Did you like it? I think you did. Did you like it?
I did like it.
All right, for Elise, we like it. Okay, how often do you get that joke? A lot?
So many times.
Really?
I can't tell you. Oh, absolutely.
Okay, see? It's got an umlaut. Elise, we thank you for bringing your umlaut-related humor to the show. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, our panel is waiting in the wings to talk to you about what happens when employers start complying with Obamacare and what happens to the people who work for them and how will they vote. I think you might be able to guess. We'll talk about that when we come back, so stick around.
For the vast majority of people who have health insurance that works, you can keep it. For the fewer than 5% of Americans who buy insurance on your own, you will be getting a better deal.
We're talking about 5% of the population who are in what's called the individual market. They're out there buying health insurance on their own. Keep in mind that the individual market accounts for 5% of the population. So when I said you can keep your health care, I'm looking at folks who've got employer-based health care. I'm looking at folks who've got Medicare and Medicaid, and that accounts for the vast majority of Americans.
And that was a smorgasbord of caveats from President Obama about when he modified the "if you like it, you can keep it" pledge that he made that people were very cross about. And this is Power Play. Welcome back. Now, here's the thing. Those statements aren't really true either. There will be further caveatage as we go forward. Those statements were when the president was facing questions about all the cancellation notices that went out about the 5% of Americans who are on independent insurance policies. But now Obamacare is starting to do its thing on the broader market, including the 80% of Americans who get their insurance through their employer. So what about that? We have a posse to examine the question. Brad Blakeman is a former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. Yeah. He's a Republican operative. Yeah. That's all true. But he is a professor at the Georgetown University. He is a serious person, and you should see him. Sometimes he's around here with his glasses on, and it just scares the bejeebers out of me because I think you're going to fail me. David Mercer is a former deputy national finance director for the Democratic National Committee. Ding! But he is also a Democratic strategist. Do you wear glasses at all?
I don't.
Okay.
Nor contacts.
Right, so Mercer doesn't scare me. We just like having him around. Okay, is that fair, would you say?
You should get some glasses.
Yeah, get some glasses and wear them like Brad does, right down here, so you get the full Brit Hume treatment where you're like, whatever I did, I'm just super sorry. All right, so I want to ask you guys the iterative process on if you like it, you can keep it. We're getting into the next phase, which is employers are getting ready to start the jettisoning. There was huge discussion about the CBO report. For the last 2 days, we've had this maelstrom of discussion about is it good for people, the job lock versus blah, 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 back and forth. The thing that largely was overlooked in the report was the 7 million people who are going to not be insured through their employers. This is the CBO's estimate. The 7 million people who are not going to be employed through their insurers, their workplace, that would have been if it weren't for the law. That's the dump. Those are the people that, and I don't mean that pejoratively. I'm not saying that's not a negative dump. That could be a positive. It could be, what do you guys, you call it, a transition. You could be transitioned from an employer plan to Obamacare. That's about to start, and we see the report from the survey from Duke that says 40% of employers say that they're going to, if not fully dump, they're going to make some changes as a result. Right, Brad?
You bet. And it's a matter of economics. If you're an employer and you're now saddled with Obamacare for workers that work 40 hours a week, and you're looking at what that adds to your bottom line in salary, bonuses, expenses, and so forth, healthcare now is a big chunk of the benefit of employment. So naturally, employers in a bad economy as it is already are weighing their options as to, do we drastically reduce salaries? to cover for Obamacare, or do we make other options available? And the options available, same thing with the youth, is you're giving businesses an out. Reduce hours. If a youth doesn't want to pay a premium, they pay a penalty.
So, David, this is part of the design of the law. This is part of the appeal, was the appeal at the time of passage of the law, is that what would happen would be, I'm sorry, I'm hearing myself in my ear and I don't like to go crazy, but that the passage of the law, part of the argument was, hey, this is going to be great because companies won't have to do this. That's why big employers said, hey, a little Obamacare might be a little all right here, because companies like Walmart, or, I mean, you can argue that General Motors went bankrupt and was taken over by the federal government largely because it couldn't afford its health plans anymore. It was, I think their CEO at the time said, they realized they were a health company that happened to make cars. So that was part of the appeal of this. It will not, however, I promise, be appealing to the individuals who are getting the dump, right?
Well, let's say this with regard to the Duke study. That's a projection, and as we know, there's a an employer mandate that is postponed now until 2015. So this is a projection, and I like to stick to the facts and the actual study of the CBO report, which states clearly that there's no discernible impact on the increase of part-time employment. And
no, I'm not talking about the part-time employment. I'm talking about the dump, the 6 to 7 million people.
And there is no discernible impact on unemployment, that it would raise unemployment. So you might have some CEOs. You might
just the insurance piece.
And I'm working my way there.
Wind it up. All right.
That with the Duke study from several CEOs who now may be positioning in advance of 2015 to blame something on Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, when in fact, I don't think they should be considering being saddled, as Brad points out, with workers being saddling the employers. Right. In fact, these employers give their life and their work to these employers, and so they're just going to have to be competitive as they have been, with 90-some-odd% of insurance being provided by employers.
It's a midterm election year. It's a midterm election year.
Yep.
And
Obama's working. ObamaCare is working.
On a philosophical level, that's whatever. You guys could debate that. I'm saying that in real time in the election year, you remember how everybody lost their minds when the cancellation notices went out last year?
Yet.
Right. But that's my point.
And that's passed.
No, you got the next round.
That
you got
is
the bigger
passed.
one.
And you also have you now have a website that works, and you have 3 million people who have now come on to being insured where they weren't insured before.
Just the tip of the iceberg. The real pain that's going to be felt is by the individuals who are now going to be reduced from full-time to part-time, and employers now.
But that's a projection and not happening.
It's not going to happen.
You don't think that
you guys have been saying a lot of things are going to happen with Obamacare, but you haven't mentioned the millions of people, especially young adults, that are now insured because they can be on their parents' insurance, which doesn't cost them what it would if they weren't on insurance and they became ill or hit with a tragedy. So people are benefiting, and those people are also going to the polls in November of this year.
There's no question that those things are true, but what I am saying is we know for sure, and the CBO in a modest estimate says 6 to 7 million people are going to not have employer health insurance that do now. That's the dump.
And
that's a lot.
And if we looked at this a year ago, there would be no option, no alternative for those people. But now we do have Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act that gives them the option. Should an employer?
I'm not done with you guys. I'm not done with you guys. You need to stick around. Do we need to take a break? I don't think we have to take a break. Can we just? Well, we do have to take a break. We're going to rob a few seconds from you, but when we come back, we have one of the other competitors in one of the hottest Senate races in the country right now. Shane Osborne from Nebraska will be with us. We'll talk to him, and we'll keep the panel, so stick around. And those amber waves of grain are corn. And you better like corn a lot if you want to represent Nebraska in the United States Senate. This is Power Play. Wasn't that attractive? That was good-looking corn. Not as good-looking as like buttered corn, but very attractive corn. And out there in the corn husker state, They have one of the hottest Senate races in the country going on right now as Republicans spar over as a FYI, nobody likes Obamacare, just for the record, but how best to deal with the president's signature health law. It's a big issue, and a new poll in that race says that it's neck and neck. I want you to meet and get to know Shane Osborne. He is running for Senate out there in Nebraska. He is a former state treasurer. He is a former Navy pilot. You may have met or heard of him during the incident way back when, in 2001, when he was a guest of the Chinese government for a while. How are we doing, Shane?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Chris.
I hope the accommodations in New York are better than they were in China.
It's not. That's not a tough.
Not a tough. That's an easy one.
Cover. Yeah, okay. That's an easy one for sure.
Okay. Now here's a question for you. We had one of your opponents, Ben Sass, on the show not too long ago. We talked with him. He said this was about Obamacare, that this election in Nebraska was about Obamacare and that the national moment was about Obamacare. But I will point out that Nebraskans probably have other concerns and other interests too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Obamacare is a big deal, but it's part of the larger problem of what's going on with our federal government and the overreach. And so, having traveled over 35,000 miles across Nebraska, I can tell you that it's Obamacare, but it's also the regulations and the regulators that are attacking our ag sector, our manufacturing sector, our energy sector, and that's what I hear from businessmen and women all over the place. So yes, Obamacare is a big issue, but it's part of a bigger problem.
Now, speaking of agriculture, a lot of conservatives were howling about this farm bill that is headed to the president's signature tomorrow, saying it's pork-packed and bad. What do you think?
Well, I agree. There was a lot of things stuck in this thing in conference that didn't need to be. There's that mandatory country of origin labeling that hurts livestock producers. The corn and soybean growers, it worked out okay. It's unfortunate of what happens with these bills behind closed doors and all the things that get stuck into it that are wasteful and not needed, quite frankly.
All right. Now, one provision that was in there, the Senate Minority Leader took credit for a provision legalizing industrial hemp, which is a big issue for his home state. He was part of that. Should he come in for some reproof for that?
Well, we don't grow a lot of industrial hemp in Nebraska, so I'm not really up to speed on that market.
Okay, all right. Industrial hemp, and I don't think Nebraska is going to be legalizing pot probably very soon.
I think that's safe to assume.
A fairly safe assumption.
Yes.
All right, so you guys have a couple more debates going on out there. This has been a closely watched race. And Mr. Sass, of course, was a cover boy for the National Review, and he has gotten a lot of national attention. So have you. Do you think that the national discussion about this race really has much to say about what happens in Nebraska?
You know, my focus has always been on Nebraska. That's how I beat an incumbent Republican for state treasurer, is just focusing in the state. And that's what we do every day. Getting out there, driving all over. We have volunteers doing over 20,000 live calls a week. We're knocking on thousands of doors a week, and we're building coalitions inside the state. The Veterans Coalition, the Sheriff's Coalition, several former and current state senators, and that's how you win in Nebraska. It's a very retail politics state. There's only about 220,000 voters, and if they're going to vote for you, they want to shake your hand and get to know you. So the national attention can bring some things in, but people really pay attention to Nebraska.
All right, well, we're paying attention to Nebraska now. Shane Osborne, we thank you for making time for us. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. All right, Internet. All right, so see now there are two more candidates in that race, and the door is open to them. We hope to see them, but these two in the most recent poll are the ones who are the front runners, and it's kind of a big deal. So we thank you for your indulgence interview. Now we will go back to what the unfinished business. There is unfinished business here with David Mercer and Brad Blakeman, and that's it. David, I'm not talking about what happens with Obamacare vis-a-vis whether it's good law or bad law, whether people like it, whether they don't like it. I'm saying that if you have 7 million people that lose their employer-based insurance in the fall, as a matter of fact, that's when it will happen. It will happen in July, and it will happen in August, and it'll happen in September and October. That's when those notices will go out. You don't think people are going to freak out?
I think having gone through this this past fall,
okay,
and that with the apparatus in place and getting better and improved, those that do switch from an employer-based insurance to Affordable Care Act and the exchanges will allow for a easier transition into it, and they will see the merits of doing so, and that they in fact had an option and were left with nothing, and not left with anything.
All right, Brad,
or nothing.
Well, if you had employer-based health care,
right,
and you don't,
right,
regardless of whether you can get it,
right,
it's still money in your pocket that you didn't have to do
right
before Obamacare.
Right.
So when the $7 million get dropped, and I hope they can switch,
right,
but they're still going to have to pay for it because it's a benefit that is lost.
And there are some that will be subsidized.
That is where the rub is going to be.
Right. There are those that will be subsidized as well.
Perhaps or perhaps not, depending on their hours.
And really that's part of how we talk about this a lot, but part of this is when you take the abstraction of policy and put it into real life experience, and both the left and the right do this, things that sound good in abstraction, when it's time to put real people through the process, we have an inability.
As we found with Medicare Part D,
right,
where people went to the pharmacy and they weren't signed up and they didn't get their pharmaceuticals. But that worked out, and you couldn't have a congressman or senator argue against Medicare Part D at this point, and the same will be
free pills for the elderly. Free pills for the elderly ain't never going away because they vote like crazy. Yeah. Guys, we thank you for making time for us today. Good as always. And you, Internet, you're good as always. Indefatigably good. Yeah, I'll go with that. We'll take that, and we'll also take you now to a word from our friend Charles.
The statement that Carney made is going to be emblazoned on the tombstone of liberalism. He says opportunity, this is what he's heralding in this achievement, that the government is giving opportunity for people to decide if they want to work. This is the liberals' ideal of the opportunity society.